Hi guys! Are you ready for chapters 6 and 7 of The Wizard of Oz? I'm excited. I like this book a lot. Anyway, The Wizard of Oz is public domain, and chapter 6 is The Cowardly Lion. All this time, Dorothy and her companions had been walking through the thick woods. The road was still paved with yellow brick, but these were much covered with dried branches and dead leaves from the trees, and the walking was not at all good. There were few birds in this part of the forest, for birds love the open country where there is plenty of sunshine. But now and then there came a deep growl from some wild animal hidden among the trees. These sounds made the little girl's heart beat fast, for she did not know what made them. But Toto knew, and he walked close to Dorothy's side and did not even bark in return. "How long will it be," the child asked of the Tin Woodman, "before we were out of the forest?" "I cannot tell," was the answer, "for I have never been to the Emerald City. But my father went there once when I was a boy, and he said it was a long journey through a dangerous country. Although near to the city where Oz dwells, the country is beautiful. But I'm not afraid so long as I have my oil can, and nothing can hurt the Scarecrow. While you bear upon your forehead the mark of the Good Witch's kiss, and that will protect you from harm." "But Toto," said the girl anxiously, "what will protect him?" "We must protect him ourselves if he is in danger," replied the Tin Woodsman. But just as he spoke, there came from the forest a terrible roar, and the next moment a great lion bounded into the road. With one blow of his paw, he sent the Scarecrow spinning over and over into the edge of the road. Then he struck at the Tin Woodsman with his sharp claws. But to the lion's surprise, he could make no impression on the tin, although the woodsman fell over in the road and lay still. Little Toto, now that he had an enemy to face, ran barking toward the lion, and the great beast had opened his mouth to bite the dog, when Dorothy, fearing Toto would be killed and heedless of danger, rushed forward and slapped the lion upon his nose as hard as she could, while she cried out, "Don't you dare to bite Toto! You ought to be ashamed of yourself, a big beast like you, to bite a poor little dog." "I didn't bite him," said the lion, as he rubbed his nose with his paw where Dorothy had hit it. "No, but you tried to," she retorted. "You are nothing but a big coward." "I know it," said the lion, hanging his head in shame. "I've always known it. But how can I help it?" "I don't know, I'm sure. To think of your striking a stuffed man like the poor Scarecrow." "Is he stuffed?" asked the lion in surprise, as he watched her pick up the Scarecrow and set him on his feet while she patted him into shape again. "Of course he's stuffed," replied Dorothy, who was still angry. "That's why he went over so easily," remarked the lion. "It astonished me to see him whirl around so. Is the other one stuffed too?" "No," said Dorothy. "He's made of tin," and she helped the woodsman up again. "That's why he nearly blunted my claws," said the lion. When they scratched against the tin, it made a cold shiver run down my back. What is the little animal you are so tender of?" "He is my dog Toto," answered Dorothy. "Is he made of tin or stuffed?" asked the lion. "Neither. He's a meat dog," said the girl. "Oh, he's a curious animal, and seems remarkably small now that I look at him. No one would think of biting such a little thing, except a coward like me," continued the lion sadly. "What makes you a coward?" asked Dorothy, looking at the great beast in wonder, for he was as big as a small horse. "It's a mystery," replied the lion. "I suppose I was born that way. All the other animals in the forest naturally expected me to be brave, for the lion is everywhere thought to be the king of the beasts. I learned that if I roared very loudly, every living thing was frightened and got out of my way. Whenever I've met a man, I've been awfully scared, but I just roared at him and he has always run away as fast as he could go. If the elephants and the tigers and the bears had ever tried to fight me, I should have run myself. I'm such a coward. But just as soon as they hear me roar, they all try to get away from me, and of course I let them go." "But that isn't right. The king of beasts shouldn't be a coward," said the Scarecrow. I know it, returned the lion, wiping a tear from his eye with the tip of his tail. It is my great sorrow, and makes my life very unhappy. But whenever there is danger, my heart begins to beat fast. Perhaps you have a heart disease, said the Tin Woodman. It may be, said the lion. If you have, continued the Tin Woodman, you ought to be glad, for it proves you have a heart. For my part, I have no heart, so I cannot have heart disease. Perhaps, said the lion thoughtfully, if I had no heart, I should not be a coward. Have you brains? Asked the Scarecrow. I suppose so. I've never looked to see, replied the lion. I'm going to the Great Oz to ask him to give me some, remarked the Scarecrow, for my head is stuffed with straw. And I'm going to ask him to give me a heart, said the Woodsman. And I'm going to ask him to send Toto and me back to Kansas, added Dorothy. Do you think Oz could give me courage? Asked the Cowardly Lion. Just as easily as he could give me brains, said the Scarecrow. Or give me a heart, said the Tin Woodsman. Or send me back to Kansas, added Dorothy. Then, if you don't mind, I'll go with you, said the lion. For my life is simply unbearable without a bit of courage. You'll be very welcome, answered Dorothy, for you will help to keep away the other wild animals. It seems to me they must be more cowardly than you, if they allow you to scare them so easily. They really are, said the lion, but that doesn't make me any braver. And as long as I know myself to be a coward, I shall be unhappy. So once more the little company set off upon the journey, the lion walking with stately strides at Dorothy's side. Toto did not approve of this new comrade at first, for he could not forget how nearly he had been crushed between the lion's great jaws. But after a time he became more at ease, and presently Toto and the Cowardly Lion had grown to be good friends. During the rest of the day there was no other adventure to be had. During the rest of that day there was no other adventure to mar the peace of their journey. Once, indeed, the Tin Woodsman stepped upon a beetle that was crawling along the road and killed the poor little thing. This made the Tin Woodsman very unhappy, for he was always careful not to hurt any living creature. And as he walked along, he wept several tears of sorrow and regret. These tears ran slowly across his face and over the hinges of his jaw, where they rusted. When Dorothy presently asked him a question, the Tin Woodsman could not open his mouth, for his jaws were tightly rusted together. He became greatly frightened at this, and made many motions to Dorothy to relieve him. But she could not understand. The lion was also puzzled to know what was wrong. But the Scarecrow seized the oil can from Dorothy's basket and oiled the Woodsman's jaws, so that after a few moments he could talk as well as before. This will serve me a lesson, he said, to look where I step, for if I should kill another bug or beetle, I would surely cry again, and crying rusts my jaws, so that I cannot speak. Therefore, as he walked very carefully with his eyes on the road, when he saw a tiny ant toiling by, he would step over it, so as not to harm it. The Tin Woodsman knew very well that he had no heart, and therefore he took great care to never be cruel or unkind to anyone. You people with hearts, he said, have something to guide you, and need never do wrong. But I have no heart, and so I must be very careful. When Oz gives me a heart, of course, I needn't mind so much. All right, Chapter 7, The Journey to the Great Oz. They were obliged to camp out that night under a large tree in the forest, for there were no houses near. The tree made a good thick covering to protect them from the dew, and the Tin Woodsman chopped a great pile of wood with his axe, and Dorothy built a splendid fire that warmed her and made her feel less lonely. She and Toto ate the last of their bread, and now she did not know what they would do for breakfast. If you wish, asked the lion, I'll go into the forest and kill a deer for you. You can roast it by the fire, since your tastes are so peculiar that you prefer cooked food. But then you will have a very good breakfast. Don't, please don't, begged the Tin Woodsman. I should certainly weep if you killed a poor deer, and then my jaws would rust again. But the lion went away into the forest and found his own supper, and no one ever knew what it was, for he didn't mention it. And the Scarecrow found a tree full of nuts and filled Dorothy's basket with them so that she would not be hungry, for a long time. She thought this was very kind and thoughtful of the Scarecrow, but she laughed heartily at the awkward way in which the poor creature picked up the nuts. His padded hands were so clumsy that the nuts were so small that he dropped almost as many as he put in the basket. But the Scarecrow did not mind how long it took him to fill the basket, for it enabled him to keep away from the fire, as he feared a spark might set into his straw and burn him up. So he kept a good distance away from the flames and only came near to cover Dorothy with dry leaves when she lay down to sleep. These kept her very snug and warm, and she slept soundly until morning. When it was daylight, the girl bathed her face in a little rippling brook, and soon after they all started toward the Emerald City. This was to be an eventful day for the travelers. They had hardly been walking an hour when they saw before a great ditch that covered the road and divided the forest as far as they could see on either side. It was a very wide ditch. When they crept up to the edge and looked down, they could see it was also very deep, and there were many big, jagged rocks at the bottom. The sides were so steep that none of them could climb down, and for a moment it seemed that their journey must end. "What shall we do?" asked Dorothy despairingly. "I haven't the faintest idea," said the Tin Woodsman, and the Lion shook his shaggy mane and looked thoughtful. But the Scarecrow said, "We cannot fly, that's certain. Neither can we climb down into this great ditch. Therefore, if we cannot climb over, we must stop where we are." "I think I could climb over it," said the Cowardly Lion. "Or I think I could jump over it," said the Cowardly Lion, after measuring the distance carefully in his mind. "Then we are all right," answered the Scarecrow, "for you can carry us all over on your back, one at a time." "Well, I'll try it," said the Lion. "Who will go first?" "I will," declared the Scarecrow, "for if you found that you could not jump over the gulf, Dorothy would be killed or the Tin Woodsman badly dented on the rocks below. But if I am on your back, it will not matter so much, for the fall would not hurt me at all." "I'm terribly afraid of falling myself," said the Cowardly Lion, "but I suppose there's nothing to do but try. So get on my back and we will make the attempt." The Scarecrow sat upon the Lion's back, and the big beast walked to the edge of the gulf and crouched down. "Why don't you run and jump?" asked the Scarecrow. "Because that isn't the way we lions do these things," he replied. Then, giving a great spring, he shot through the air and landed safely on the other side. Sorry, my nose is itching. It's allergy season, guys. They were all greatly pleased to see how easily he did it, and after the Scarecrow had got down from his back, the Lion sprang across the ditch again. Dorothy thought she would go next, so she took Toto in her arms and climbed on the Lion's back, holding tightly to his mane with one hand. The next moment it seemed as if she were flying through the air, and then, before she had time to think about it, she was safe on the other side. The Lion went back a third time and got the Tin Woodsman, and then they all sat down for a few moments to give the beast a chance to rest, for his great leaps had made his breath short, and he panted like a big dog that had been running too long. They found the forest very thick on this side, and it looked dark and gloomy. After the Lion had rested, they started along the road of yellow brick, silently wondering, each in his own mind, if they would ever come to the end of the woods and reach the bright sunshine again. To add to their discomfort, they soon heard strange noises in the depths of the forest, and the Lion whispered to them that it was in this part of the country that the Kalidas lived. "What are the Kalidas?" asked the girl. "They are monstrous beasts with bodies like bears and heads like tigers," replied the Lion, "and with claws so long and sharp that they could tear me in two as easily as I could kill Toto. I'm terribly afraid of the Kalidas." "I'm not surprised that you are," returned Dorothy. "They must be dreadful beasts." The Lion was about to reply when suddenly they came to another gulf across the road, but this one was so broad and deep that the Lion knew at once that they could not leap across it. So they sat down to consider what they should do. And after serious thought, the Scarecrow said, "There is a great tree standing close to the ditch. If the Tin Woodsman can chop it down so that it will fall to the other side, we can walk across it easily." "That's a first-rate idea," said the Lion. "One would almost suspect you had brains in your head instead of straw." The woodsman set to work at once, and so sharp was his axe that the tree was soon chopped nearly through. Then the lion put his strong front paws against the tree and pushed with all his might, and slowly the big tree tipped and fell with a crash across the ditch, with its top branches on the other side. They had just started to cross this queer bridge when a sharp growl made them all look up, and to their horror, they saw running towards them with two great beasts with bodies like bears and heads like tigers. "They are the Kalidas," said the Cowardly Lion, beginning to tremble. "Quick," cried the Scarecrow, "let us cross over." So Dorothy went first, holding Toto in her arms. The Tin Woodsman followed, and the Scarecrow came next. The lion, although he was certainly afraid, turned to face the Kalidas. And then he gave so loud and terrible a roar that Dorothy screamed and the Scarecrow fell over backwards, while even the fierce beast stopped short and looked at him in surprise. But, seeing they were bigger than the lion, and remembering that there were two of them and only one of him, the Kalidas again rushed forward and the lion crossed over the tree and turned to see what they would do next. Without stopping an instant, the fierce beast also began to cross the tree. And the lion said to Dorothy, "We are lost, for they will surely tear us to pieces with their sharp claws. But stand close behind me and I will fight them as long as I'm alive." "Wait a minute," called the Scarecrow. He had been thinking what was the best to be done, and now he asked the woodsman to chop away at the end of the tree that rested on their side of the ditch. The Tin Woodsman began using his axe at once, and just as the two Kalidas were nearly across, the tree fell with a crash into the gulf, carrying the ugly, snarling beast with it, and both were dashed to pieces on the sharp rocks at the bottom. "Well," said the Cowardly Lion, drawing a long breath of relief, "I see that we are going to live a little while longer, and I'm glad of it, for it must be a very uncomfortable thing to not be alive. Those creatures frightened me so badly that my heart is beating yet." "Ah," said the Tin Woodsman loudly, "I wish I had a heart to beat." This adventure made the travelers more anxious than ever to get out of the forest, and they walked so fast that Dorothy became tired and had to ride on the lion's back. To their great joy, the trees became thinner the further they advanced, and in the afternoon they had suddenly come upon a broad river flowing swiftly just before them. On the other side of the river, they could see the road of yellow brick running through a beautiful country, with green meadows dotted with bright flowers, and all the road bordered with trees hanging full of delicious fruits. They were greatly pleased to see this delightful country before them. "How shall we cross the river?" asked Dorothy. "That is easily done," replied the Scarecrow. "The Tin Woodsman must build us a raft so we can float to the other side." So the woodsman took his axe and began to chop down small trees to make a raft. And while he was busy with this, the Scarecrow found on the riverbank a tree full of fine fruit. This pleased Dorothy, who had eaten nothing but nuts all day, and she made a hearty meal of the ripe fruit. But it takes time to make a raft, even when one is as industrious and untiring as the Tin Woodsman, and when night came, the work was not done. So they found a cozy place under the trees, where they slept well until the morning, and Dorothy dreamed of the Emerald City and of the good Wizard Oz, who would soon send her back to her own home again. All right, guys, that's the end for tonight, and I'll be back tomorrow night with 2 more chapters. Have a good day, guys.